I get into this, when we started planning for this episode, the headline was that Sony has a major hit on their hands because the biggest, I think, what we got the sales numbers for Helldivers 2, and it is officially like the best-selling game of the year. It is, according to Matt Piscatella over at the thing that used to be, what's it called? It's they do the sales charts things.
Used to be MPD, now it's
Circana. Yeah, we're doing a good job here. So yeah, no, he said PC has been a huge part of the success of Helldivers 2 in the US. With PC, Helldivers 2 has already the 7th highest grossing Sony published game in history. Without PC, it wouldn't currently rank among the top 20, which is utterly mind-boggling. Sony has a bona fide, quantifiable hit on their hands with Helldivers 2. It's huge. It's massive. It's one of the biggest games of the year. It came out of nowhere. I don't think anyone was expecting this. It's massive. It's got a wonderful, active community. It's great. What could possibly go wrong to disrupt that in any capacity? And if you answered, mandatory PSN linking for PC accounts, you would be correct, because between when we had our first little meeting being like, jeepers, what should we talk about next week? There sure isn't much in the way of news. This dropped, and Sony put out a big announcement basically being like, hey, if you have a PC account, you're playing on PC, as by the end of the month, all accounts to play online, they will have to pair a PSN account with their Steam account so that they can something safety and security and community management something. They didn't really give a very stable reason for doing this, and the fact that people have been playing this game for 3 months without it being linked kind of pokes any holes in the fact that this is like an urgent, necessary fix. The big issue with this is that PSN is not available in around like 177 territories.
Yeah, it's
so
a lot.
Yeah. So just an amazing fumble. And thankfully they've already reversed it, but it's just what did we learn,
Well, like, what was really frustrating about this is that obviously the players almost immediately assumed that this was a decision from the developer at Arrowhead, and it was not. Like, this is sometimes your parent company says like, hey, this is what you have to do today, and you're like, no. And everyone went in and review bombed Helldivers 2 and Helldivers 1 and pretty much anything else associated with the studio ever. And it's like, it's a bummer. I get it, because there isn't really like another place to get that message out, and people were frustrated. But it wasn't their choice. It wasn't their fault. But you can't review bomb PlayStation unless like you go on Yelp and leave a negative review for their headquarters or whatever. Otherwise it's just a company that is sort of disembodied from these decisions, although they're the ones making them. But yeah, the fact that they held up this thing as like a sort of like, a security measure, and then immediately backtracked it, when all of us who've been covering PlayStation for a long time, or playing PlayStation games, or just watching this space at all, have known that PlayStation is like the most notoriously hacked company. Like, they get hacked like every 4 years. If not more. Like, one of when PSN went down, it was like a huge problem. When the Sony hack first came out, when there was that email about the Mario movie, and like they were working on a Spider-Man sequel that like one of the CEOs was like, oh, put some EDM in it because my son really likes that. Like, there was then there was Insomniac last year. Like, this happens constantly, and so for them to be like, this is a big security concern, and then 3 days later being like, we've heard you, and it's actually not that much of a big security concern, so don't worry about it. But like, the damage is already done. Helldivers 2 got review bombed. Helldivers 1 got review bombed.
Yeah.
Like,
But
people are pissed off about this.
yeah, a lot of those review bombs were because of this stance that this whole implementation, and the fact that I think that the fact that PlayStation walked it back. I'm hopefully people go back and they kind of change their reviews, because that was the motivating factor for like the negative review bombs, is because like hey, I can't play this game in my region because I don't I can't sign up for a PSN account.
Yeah.
And the fact that even the CEO of Arrowhead, he actually he encouraged this, because he wanted to make sure that people knew that, no, look, this wasn't our decision. This was something that PlayStation, they wanted to do when the game first launched, but I think it was like server issues, and so they couldn't. And so, I don't know why they didn't use those 3 months to kind of assess the regions that this game is released in currently, and the fact that
Yeah.
like I believe in like well, I'll just say some countries you actually need to own either a PS4 or a PS5 in order to even sign up for a PSN account. So
which is super frustrating. And it's
yeah,
like that actually, I mean, that was interesting because that opened up a bigger conversation where it was just like, oh, there's like 150 plus countries where you can't access PSN,
right.
like
Yeah,
period. And I'm like, that's a problem for like a major global brand, right?
yeah,
That's like,
exactly.
yeah, that was crazy to me. So it's like
And the
that,
fact
yeah,
that they had 3 months to think about this,
I
and
know.
they still decided to roll this. They still decided to double down on this decision. Like, yeah, let's do this. This thing we were going to do 3 months ago
So they actually
initially.
had more time than that.
Yeah.
Johan Palstead, who's the CEO of Arrowhead and who's been kind of refreshingly transparent and open throughout this whole thing. I mean, he basically posted like, "Hey, this wasn't our call. If you have any complaints, here's the link to the
Mhm.
official PlayStation customer support." No, somebody called him out for being like, "This, you're not completely blameless here," and he said, "No, that's true. I'm not. We did know about this. It was my decision to make it so that this wasn't a requirement at launch because I wanted
Yeah.
people to be able to play the game." And he goes on to say that they knew 6 months prior to launch that this was going to be a requirement for Sony online games. So it wasn't a surprise. I'm guessing that some people internally probably spoke up against this and said, this might not be a great idea. I would assume that if removing this feature made it easier to launch the game, perhaps that is something that impedes the game itself. Just a thought, throwing that out there. But yeah, he said basically they were guilty of not emphasizing enough that this would be the case down the road. And I mean, had they at launch been like, you need a PSN account to sign into this game, period, it would not have sold as well. Like
Mhm.
flat out, a lot of people would have either been mad at it or they would have just moved on and not even bothered playing it in the first place.
But
And
also, like,
that's
yeah, introducing that when the game is like hitting peak concurrence regularly and it's in popularity and stuff like that, and it's like it's so short-sighted and stupid. And like, yes, let's be like totally honest here. It's not like it's not the worst thing in the world. Like, I'm not going to side with Sony on this one, but like, it's just like it's an extra hurdle to hop over, right? But it's not like they're like, oh, suddenly you have to pay for PSN or whatever to access this. But on the PC gaming side, like that's just a thing that people don't really want to put up with. They don't want to put up with like extra launchers and extra logins and blah 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 blah. It's unnecessary. You're already going through Steam, accessing the game and stuff like that, and you're playing it in the way you play all of your games. And like there's just like a level of like understanding that a lot of developers have on the PC gaming side where they're like, don't mess with the audience there. And Sony's official tweet on this was like basically like, hey guys, we're still kind of reading the room on PC gaming, we're still trying to figure it out. And then we just found out a few days later, like Ghost of Tsushima is coming to PC, and for multiplayer you will need a PSN account. So it's like they're still kind of shooting themselves in the foot on some of this stuff. And I I don't know. Like it feels like if they want to work in this new world, you're where you're like successful on console and on PC at the same time on the same day, like they're going to have to figure out that rules are different across those platforms. Like on the console side, you're in a walled garden and you're kind of like, hey, you can't do anything without our say, right? Like you have to pay to go online. You have to, you have to be to like to play with a like you need a PSN account on your PS5. That's sort of just like baked in. That's part of it. But on PC, like people don't want to deal with like 600 different logins for every single game that they have. They just want to be able to jump in and start playing and then jump out and play something else. And so like they're going to have to figure this out. And I'm glad they backtracked on this. It was stupid that it happened to begin with, because it was sort of like you guys have this, like you're like the way you set up the story, Max, like this is an incredibly successful game, almost largely because of PC. Like the console's doing a lot of heavy lifting too, but the PC side is like why one of the big reasons this game is what it is right now. And like when we're talking about like the biggest games of this year at the end of this year and the game of the year and all that, like Helldivers 2 is going to be part of the conversation, and a
Yeah.
big part of that is because of the PC community. And so to like mess with that and yeah, like poke that bear is just
Yeah.
extremely stupid. And so I really hope that they figure out what to do for future titles, because they're gonna launch future titles day and date. Whether or not they say they are right now, they're looking at analytics right now and metrics, and they're saying like, dude, we got to do this. Like this
yeah.
this has to be the thing that we do, for at least specifically for something that has a multiplayer component to it.
But they're also like, we don't have enough analytics. What if we had people's PSN analytics? Let's make them all sign up for PSN. No,
Yeah.
it's they're also just a live service game. There
Yeah.
are so many of them. It's such a completely, brutal marketplace right now. You're competing for people's time and their money. I mean, in the case of Helldivers, like it would have had, to fight to do its own thing were it free to play. And the fact that it's a game you have to pay for, a premium game, like that's on its own, that's a hurdle on its own to get people to shell out actual money to buy a game to mess around with, which entirely hinges on there being a multiplayer ecosystem to engage with. If no
Mhm.
one's playing, you're not going to play. That's just kind of how it is. Like if a multiplayer game doesn't really work without the multi component, and asking multiple people to spend money on the product is again one more hurdle, and then asking them to sign up for a thing to log into, another hurdle. You don't want to have that many things in their way if you're trying to get them to actually play the game.